Okay, so we move on now, and we talk about the argument against God's existence, and you do find that on the last page, page 4 actually, of your. Sorry, I just ran over down the stairs. On page 4 of your notes, and let me explain how it comes out. So, I mentioned in the previous video actually that we have two faculties: the faculty of the intellect or of thinking, and the faculty of free will. And Descartes says, well, God is so perfect, why would God create beings that are imperfect? How is it possible that God, who's so wonderful, makes me, a human being who makes errors? Why would God do so? Especially because if I make errors, I bring evil into the world, right? If I make errors, I sin in a religious sense, or I could say that if I make errors, I bring pain and suffering to other people, or even to myself. So why would God create such a world? Descartes goes easily over that, and he says, well, clearly I am not perfect, which means I do not have a perfect understanding, which means that I may not be able to see the high purpose of the world. Right? So I may perceive that my life is in pain and suffering, and I may not understand the meaning for all that. But God, who has a divine vision of all that, He understands why my life, even if maybe painful for me, would be just best for the best possible world. So, for example, one could say, does every element of one's face, or must every element of one's face be beautiful in order for the face to be beautiful? Well, not really. One could say, well, you have a horrible nose, but it's just wonderful. It's perfect on your face because it creates your face as a beautiful one. And apparently, a student actually told me this once. Some people made a experiment, a magazine, and they wanted to create the most beautiful face ever. So they took the eyes from I do not know what actress, and the nose from some other actress, and the ears from another actress, and whoops, the result was a monster. Why? Because they did not match. So, if we apply that to Descartes' theory, we could say, I don't have to have a perfect life in order for the whole world to be perfect. Perhaps the world is perfect having the elements it has. In the same way in which a face can be perfect but having horrible elements, bad noses and bad eyes and I don't know what else, but together they make perfection. Anyway, so Descartes goes easily over this problem of why could God create a world in which there is so much suffering, and there is so much the suffering that comes from lack of understanding. But of course, other philosophers said, well, not so fast, not so fast. And the argument that has been created from that is the argument from the problem of evil, and you have it on the 4th page, as I mentioned. And it goes this way. If God exists, and we have to see the definition of God: omnibenevolent, omniscient, and omnipotent, which means all good, omnibenevolent, omniscient, all-knowing, and omnipotent, all-powerful. So if God, which has these three qualities, exist, then they say there would be no unnecessary evil in the world. However, there is unnecessary evil in the world, and the conclusion, which comes logically from the first two premises, is that God does not exist. The argument is valid. What I mean by valid is that it has a perfect form. In logic, to have a valid argument does not show that we have a true conclusion. It only means that the conclusion follows from the premises. In order for the conclusion to also be true, we have to have true premises. So now the problem will be, if these two premises, if God exists, there is no unnecessary evil in the world, first premise, and second premise, there is unnecessary evil in the world, are true. If these two premises are true, then the conclusion of the argument, God does not exist, is also true. Okay? So the debate over this argument has been conducted over whether the two premises, or the only premises, are true or not. Is it true that if God exists, there is no unnecessary evil in the world? Is it true that there is unnecessary evil in the world? And I want to emphasize it's about the unnecessary evil. It's not about evil that is necessary. You know, sometimes people may say, in order to understand the good, we need evil. Evil is necessary for us to understand what good means, because otherwise there wouldn't be any kind of understanding of good. But the argument doesn't talk about that. It talks about evil that do not seem to have any purpose. And, you know, what about cancer for children who are 2 years old? What about something like the Holocaust or any other genocides that took place in the history of humanity? What about the hurricanes? What about people dying in fires and nobody knowing about them and so on, you know? So there seems to be some kind of unnecessary evil. That's what I mean by unnecessary. Evil that doesn't seem to have any purpose. Of course, people will say that some people will say that the second premise, there is unnecessary evil in the world, is false. That is, that every evil instance that we encounter is somehow necessary. It's just that we do not see the result. But even, the purpose. But even so, you know, the argument is powerful, and I'm not saying this in order to do anything with your faith or anything like that. I'm trying to emphasize the reality of it. People who have been very faithful, the moment in which they fell upon this argument, their faith has been shaken. Why? Because they cannot accept that a genuinely good higher being can create a world in which there is so much suffering, especially because this being is all-powerful. And being all-powerful, he can create any world he wants. If he created this